With me today, I've got Jim, and we're going to be talking about diversity as a critical sales imperative. There's always chat on LinkedIn and in the press about diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality. And I wanted to find somebody that knows about this stuff and have a really good talk about it. If there's anybody in the audience that's watching this that wants to dive in and make comments or jump in and be part of the conversation, please do that. Otherwise, Jim, where can people find you?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest question to handle. People can find me on LinkedIn. That's my most active channel. You can find me on other platforms from a podcasting perspective, but find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way.
And how do you pronounce your last name?
It's a lot easier than it looks. It's Kanichirayil. So
wow,
4 syllables.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It took me till 2nd grade to figure out how to spell that. So,
so Jim, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about diversity. There's been lots of talk. I mean, there was something in the news recently about Silicon Valley Bank, and I know that Fox News, which as we all know is a very unbiased news organization. For those who don't know, I'm being sarcastic. And they said that they were running articles saying that the reason why Silicon Valley Bank went down was because they had a woke and a very diverse board.
Yeah. I'm going to reserve any commentary about that. I'll take it big picture because I know what you're getting at. And when you look at the macro outcomes of business in general and sales in particular, I'm going to call out 2 sort of data points and studies that were brought to my attention. And this is how it ties into DEIB initiatives. If you're interested in positive business outcomes, positive employee outcomes, and you're not embedding DEIB throughout your entire employee life cycle, you're going to struggle achieving those outcomes. So to your point about what Fox News said, for what it's worth, it's not based in reality. And here's what I mean. One of the founders, and I have several of them in my network, pointed this out to me. When you look at the last 10 years of data at the Standard & Poor's 500, the S&P 500, there's roughly 41 women that have led organizations on the S&P 500. And then, everybody else is led by males. So when you look at the organizational performances of the companies listed on that index, the female-led organizations, and we're just talking about gender diversity, the female-led organizations have outperformed the male-led organizations. So that's interesting. There's a real-life data point. The other data point that I'll bring in from a macro perspective, and in the S&P study was actually pointed out to me by Shireen Mikahin, who is the founder of Upful. And then another person in my network a couple of years ago brought this up, Carrie Ann Januszewski Simpson, who is one of the heads of sales at Sartorius. She pointed to a study by Exactly, and this was specific to sales. And they looked at 500 sales organizations and looked at those that were led by women and those that were led by men. Again, a gender diversity set of data points. And the women-led sales organizations outperformed the male-led sales organizations by almost 10%. And the reason why I call these out is that if you look at any leader of an organization or any investor in an organization and you come with them with this question, if I could show you a way to increase your performance by almost 10% and you only had to do one thing, would you be interested in putting that into place?
Of course.
Yeah. And then when you tell them what it is, the irony is in how little traction, just from a gender perspective, you get in the world of work. And we're not getting into some of the broader elements of DEIB, and we certainly can. There's tons of social science research that points to business outcomes being improved based on the diversity of your overall organization at all levels. And I'm making a specific point in saying all levels because we know how some of that is handled in the world of work.
I had to choke not to stop laughing, Danny basically made the comment: taking diversity advice from Fox News is like talking tree climbing advice from a fish.
Danny's awesome, and I'm a huge fan of him. He and I are connected on LinkedIn, so he's definitely worth checking out and connecting with.
I love that. It made me laugh. So what you're saying is that that there are certain data points that say that we need to have a diverse workforce. But what does diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality mean to you? Because it means different things to different people, doesn't it? Because it go back 5-10 years, it meant that you employed a woman or or something like that. Now it's far broader and it's far deeper, isn't it?
Yeah, and we could have a discussion about whether that's the right direction or not, in terms of it being broader, because there are some underlying considerations that we have to take into account. But essentially, when you bring up diversity, and this is the lens that Fox News comes at, anytime that you bring up the topic of diversity, they use the word woke as a dog whistle to point at one particular thing, and that's a racial connotation for what diversity means. And for those, and I'm not an expert in this space, there are practitioners that I can connect you to who are much more versed in this topic. I'm more of a megaphone that amplifies those voices, but
Yes.
I'm in the space too. So when you talk to people who aren't informed about these issues from a talent strategy perspective, they break it down into race and gender. And that leaves out so many other aspects of diversity that need to be considered when you're working on your organizational strategy and when you're thinking about your sales strategy and how you build an organization and also how you serve your customer base. And all of that is missed. We're missing issues from a neurodiversity perspective. We're missing issues from an accessibility perspective. We're missing issues from a gender identity perspective. We're missing issues from a sexual orientation perspective. All of those things are important because the more diverse your perspectives are within your organization, the more points of view that you have that are outside the realm of your culture fit, the better off you're going to be. Because culture fit is often used as coded language to, we want the same sort of profile in our organization. Visibly, they can be whatever, but in terms of how you approach problems, your socioeconomic background, all of that sort of stuff boils down to how culture fit tends to kind of isolate and exclude people. So it's a dangerous sort of area to start talking about. Instead, you need to be thinking about how are you leveraging the total candidate pool and making your organization attractive to the total candidate pool that exists that in the world of sales.
Because many years ago, I went for a job at KPMG, one of the big four organizations. And I was the only person in the country that could do the job, but I don't have a degree. And they particularly want someone with a 2-1. So I didn't get further than the first interview, and they actually employed somebody who couldn't do the job, but they had a 2-1.
Yeah,
and they failed and closed the group down. And so college degrees.
So I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it from the perspective of somebody who has a terminal degree. So my doctoral research or my doctoral study is in organizational leadership, and my research was in employee retention and turnover. And I have a terminal degree, and I think by and large, my opinion is that a college degree, at least in the US context, and especially in a sales context, is useless because it does not predict your capability or your ability to succeed in a sales context. And you're incurring a ton of debt for really no applicable benefit to your customer base. So and here's the bigger issue. When we are requiring college degrees for any position, there's an implicit statement that we're making, because the people that can afford to invest at that level of education are generally from a higher socioeconomic status. So you're automatically excluding a number of people from your candidate pool just by requiring a college degree. And here's the thing: in the sales context, I volunteer for Strively. I also am one of the trainers for Trainyo. The missions of both of those organizations is related in that they're helping people from underrepresented communities, and however you define that, break into the world of B2B sales. So these are people with grit, hustle, ingenuity, innovative approaches, and you're automatically excluding them from consideration because you want an expensive piece of paper that signals what to you from an outcomes perspective.
So let me just pick up on some of these comments. This is Danny, who is I'm now a fan of. If you're only listening to a small type of voices, we are at best missing out on the best weapon against groupthink, and at worst being overly discriminatory. I totally agree with that. I've worked in organizations where groupthink was it was killing us.
Yep.
And a new person that I'm now a big fan of is Kareem. In America, as a mixed Middle East and Hispanic person, I find it very difficult to accurately represent myself. None apply because MENA, Middle East and North Africa in America, is considered white. We are, I believe, the only Western country that does that. And he also goes on to comment and say 100% many of the best reps have no college degrees.
I second, I second everything that Kareem said. Kareem, make sure you connect with me. Great points. And the interesting thing about the first point that Kareem makes is, from an organizational strategy perspective, I think we're too fixated on how we're labeling ourselves from a diversity perspective. And here's what I mean. There's a couple of different problems. When you have a position description and you're trying to advance your diversity initiatives through the self-identification process, most of your candidates are, especially those from underrepresented communities, are extremely leery of self-identifying at that stage of the process because they feel that they would be excluded. And why do they feel they would be excluded? The first thing candidates are going to do, aside from looking at the position description, at some point before the interview, they're going to look at your executive team, your boards, your senior leadership. And if they see faces that do not look like theirs, and they see that you're not representative of who they are and what their identity is, they're not going to self-identify. So if your effort is to have people fill that out, I think you're going about it the wrong way, and you might be excluding a lot of people. Now there are some tricky things that come into compliance related stuff on the US side that you have to consider, but you have to think about, hey, am I maximizing my candidate pool by requiring strangers who don't know me to fill this out and potentially get excluded from the process because candidates aren't dumb? They want to maximize their opportunity to get a conversation. And that might be one of those limiting factors. And to Kareem's second point, I mean, I've had awesome rock star sales professionals without a degree. I've had them with a degree. I think if you have to pick one or the other, don't get a degree if your mission is to be in sales, because I don't think it really helps you.
So, Jim, in the last 6 minutes, what can businesses do to impact on this?
So there's
and answer that, and I'm going to put up Andrew's comment at the same time, but carry on, answer that.
Yeah. So there's 4 things that companies can do to better position themselves to attract and retain and develop diverse talent. And this applies for organizations in general or sales in particular. You can apply it to any context. One is you need to make sure that your organization is representative. So across all levels of your organization, that's the first step. Second, when you construct your job descriptions, you need to make sure that the language in those job descriptions are inclusive. Don't include stuff like Ninja, Rockstar, and all this other stuff that really turns off probably half or more, 50% or more of your candidate pool when you use language like that. So look at your job description, look at some of the basic language that you use to make sure it's inclusive and sending the right signals about who you are as an organization and where you are from a culture perspective. When you have your details in the job description, don't have a laundry list of the 50 different roles that you're trying to fill in one position description. Please don't do that. Focus on what is the outcome that you're trying to deliver. And here's why that's important. We'll just break it down from a gender perspective. When men and women look at position descriptions, if a man sees, and this is hyperbole, if a man sees that they're a 20% fit to a role, they're going to apply. Yeah. Generally speaking, if a woman is looking at that same position and they don't see themselves at an 80% or higher fit, they're not going to apply. So get away from the laundry list and look at the job to be done perspective, look at the outcome perspective, and then you're going to increase your candidate pool. You need to be disciplined and intentional about the communities that you're engaging with. If you're just posting on LinkedIn your positions or Indeed your positions, those are only attracting the 20% of the candidate landscape that's actively looking and are on socials. So that's not going to serve you from a diversity perspective because there's a socioeconomic component to it as well. So you should be looking at where do my customers sit? Where do they hang out? Where are the places that these communities are, these people go to hang out, and what's my outreach to those communities to help build my talent funnel and my talent universe. So, and fourth, you need to look at it from a talent lifecycle perspective. If you care about diversity across the organization, you need to start with your own people first. And here's what I mean. How are we as an organization setting up our internal infrastructure to help develop, retain, upskill, and reskill the existing talent that we have into the roles that we need, instead of just reflexively going into talent attraction mode? Let me find more people, because you have gold within your organizations, and actually you're probably better off developing your talent than looking for constantly new talent when your infrastructure doesn't exist, infrastructure isn't there to support it. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Did I make it in 6 minutes?
Yes, and I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I'm desperately trying to find. I had the diversity, or the ex-diversity officer of Microsoft on here, and I'm desperately trying to find her name. So sorry, I'm going to have to apologize. I can't find her name. And she said that one of the things that she did, she went to the CEO of Microsoft and said, we have to stop paying people to bringing in candidates. And it was like, oh, we need to do that, because it's all about it's all about speed. We suddenly realize we need to get somebody in. So the best people to bring in are our friends of our friends. And speed to hire is the term.
Yeah.
Whereas what she was saying is, all you're doing is that you're getting the white people to bring in more white people who look like all the other white people.
Yep. And she's not wrong. And here's where that is really tricky as a talent leader within your organization, because most talent leaders are faced with a scenario where their average job is staying open for, I think, 45 to 90 days. So each month you're burning up $4,500 or more per month for that open role. So referrals are a great program to bring in talent. You have to have mechanisms in place where you're controlling for the same sort of mono culture that you're bringing in through that referral program. So it can be a piece of the equation, but if you're relying solely on referrals as a main engine to fill your talent funnel, you're going to run into the same problem that you just described, Tim. So it's a great point.
In terms of summary, because we're at 1945, we need to basically broaden our talent pool. We need to change our job descriptions.
So here are the 4 things that organizations need to do. at an enterprise level, make sure you're embedding DEIB across all levels of the organization. Position your job descriptions so that they are communicating in the right language and also communicating on a jobs to be done perspective. Make sure that you're using intentional outreach to communities that aren't on socials, because you want to guard against narrowing your culture focus. So those are, and look at your entire talent life cycle. Focus on developing the people that you have as a critical piece of your diversity initiative, because there are people that can pick up what you need picked up, that can be upskilled or reskilled into new positions, and that's often ignored.
Jim, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. Do you know, the best ones always go really fast.
Yeah, this was a sprint. It's tough for me to be short form, and you already know that.
I do, yeah. And Danny's last point, there's also no point changing the door policy at recruiting diverse people, but the clubs still need pay. It's one type of music. You end up with a boys' club with those new, different people unable to contribute. Inclusion is the route to diversity. Fantastic. Yeah. I remember in 2019 going to San Francisco and going for a meeting, and there was a bar in the office. And it was like, you know, when you think, well, why would you have a bar in an office?
So, full disclosure, there was a point in my career where I thought that would be really cool. But then it leads to a tech bro sort of culture that is not really cool, not really inclusive to anybody else other than people that are into that stuff. So, I'll leave that for whatever it's worth. But
I kind of asked the question, and the person that we had the meeting with couldn't really answer it, and it was you know, you must have some sort of like tech bro like culture here, because anyway, Jim, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you, Andrew, Danny, and Karim for the discussion and the comments. Jim, where can people find you?
Easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. There are some other channels, but happy to connect if you want to have a shop talk about talent strategy in general, DEIB, sales, whatever. I have thoughts.
You do, and I love the fact that you one of the parts on your summary description on your LinkedIn profile is that you are a megaphone.
I sure am. Yep, I'm a professional megaphone.
How do we pronounce your second name again?
Kanichirayil.
Fantastic. Jim, thank you so much for coming on today, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.